Right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Reboot webinar series. We're really delighted to set this one up with Enterprise Ireland. Just before I hand over to Tracy Price from Enterprise Ireland to run through her slides, just give you a couple of key points that we're working on at the moment. Obviously, for those of you based in Dublin, one of the things that's really live at the minute is the restrictions that will come into effect potentially in the Dublin area over the weekend. So, you know, watching that one really closely, and anything that we get outside, we will let you know as soon as it comes up. We're also working on the employment wage subsidy scheme and the issues of, you know, a tiered approach to it. The 30% decrease is very steep, and the timing of payments being made into accounts is another thing we're working on, as is the area around rent and commercial leases with retailers as well. So lots going on, but this is just another part of it. And we were delighted that with the first round of this Enterprise Ireland online grants, that half the successful applicants for this work came from Resale Excellence Ireland members. And we worked very closely with Enterprise Ireland on this scheme for the first round. And it's great that you know, the Minister was able to turn around at the July stimulus and announce another £5.5 million of funding for this particular scheme, which is obviously being done at this moment in time. And I believe the applications will be open until the end of the month. Also very timely that we're talking around online, insofar as today we've been on media discussing the 70% of money that is done online in Ireland. 70% of it is going out of the country. So, you know, the 7 billion that is done, or 10 billion rather, that's done online in Ireland, 7 billion of that goes out of the country. So really timely that we're developing these opportunities through Enterprise Ireland to develop your online presence and keep some of that money in where it needs to be, back in the state and in your coffers. In terms of the next half an hour or so, I'm going to hand over in a moment to Tracy Price from Enterprise Ireland, who will talk you through the scheme and some of the learnings from the previous rounds. And then I'm delighted that Jessica Bird from the Kilkenny Group and Sinead Heffernan of Thunder's Bakery will also be on at the end of Tracy's presentation. And they will give their experience. They were successful in round one, and they'll give their experience and give you some tips and some pointers for those of you that are going to apply for this second round. For now, over to you, Tracy, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Duncan, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted you could take the time out today from your busy schedule to join us, and thanks for the introduction there and the overview of the scheme, which is designed to achieve, and this is the really important part, a step change in your online capability. Now, I'm not entirely sure, we just talked about it there before we came on, that we might perhaps run a poll here to see what level of the audience today has actually applied to this scheme before, just so we could get there it is. So if you can just tell us whether or not you've applied before, I'll get an idea as to what the experience level is, so I can know how detailed to go on the application process versus the assessment. Look at that. Okay, so it looks like 54% of you, it's your first time applying, and 46% of you. So that's really no help at all. So, okay, I'm going to go as fast as I can, probably about 5 minutes through some basic details that some of you will find basic. But hold on, I'll get to the assessment part with more detail after that. So I'm just going to, maybe for the purposes of my broadband here, probably get rid of the camera. That's lovely. Okay. Give that 1 second. There we go. Okay, so given what we've learned from administering the previous scheme, we feel this information session is worthwhile to ensure two things: that you understand the process of applying for the grant and hence minimize time-consuming errors that might occur, and to maximize your potential to secure funding. We experienced very high demand in the last call, and we want you to avoid unnecessary pitfalls to ensure your application gives you the best chance of succeeding in what is really a highly competitive environment for the finite funds that we have. So I'll take about 15 minutes or so, and hopefully you'll gain a better understanding of how to make a robust application. So if any of you feel you need to go into further detail on it, please visit the website that we have at www.enterprise-ireland.com/retail, and that'll come up on the last slide as well, so you can take it down from there at the end, where we give a lot of this detail. Okay, so what you can expect to hear from me today is a whistle stop of the main features of the scheme, key elements of the application process, and then I'll try and beef out the key areas that your application should cover, followed by some discussion on the eligibility of particular costs, and as importantly, what costs we can't cover. But the main message I want to focus on today is the evaluation process and some key learnings we have from previous calls for you to take away as you draft your own applications. So just a very quick recap here. The scheme responds to a need, obviously, to build Irish retailers' online capability in order to sustain through the current crisis. To achieve a step change in your existing capability. The total fund we have available to us is 5.5 million. And given the average grants that we approved in the last round that we approved in July, we're hoping to secure a fund for around 155 and to make you more competitive in your online offer. Okay, so as I said, it's a competitive scheme. So the funding is up to 40,000 euros, and that's 80% of the an expenditure of 50,000. Some of you may have applied in our previous calls, as in the one in 2019, we had 2 calls. The funding that time was only at 50%, so we have an increased funding amount here of 80% of the costs and fees of an external service provider who can help you to develop your digital strategy, and secondly, for salary costs of an internal project champion. In terms of eligibility, as you can see here, you need to be an Irish-owned retailer who employed more than 10 people on 29th of February 2020. We've had some inquiries from some retailers who are owned by a US entity, so you're not eligible unless you're an Irish-owned entity. You must have an existing online presence. Now, this can be as simple as a website, Facebook page, Instagram, other social media, and you need to show an ambition that you plan to export in the future, and your application should show a minimum expenditure of 12,500 euro. Now, using that figure then, we would be able to give you the 80% being 10,000 euro grant, which includes up to 50% of salary costs of your internal champion. I'll go into further detail on that further down. We do have an FAQ document on our website which details some expenditures and corresponding grant examples if you want to have a look into that afterwards. There are some exclusions in terms of expenditures, and again, the full list is on our website, and I don't plan to go through much of that today. I think I have one slide, but we'll move quickly through that. You will be applying using Enterprise Ireland's online application system. This is just a screen grab of what that looks like when you go in. That's all I want to show you there today. But what's really important to state at this point is we're managing this COVID scheme on behalf of the government, and you aren't a client, or you won't become a client of Enterprise Ireland. So when you're asked, as you start the application and you register as somebody who's applying to Enterprise Ireland, it will ask you if you are a client or you have an existing relationship with Enterprise Ireland, and you need to state no here, or the application will be deemed ineligible. Because if you're a client of Enterprise Ireland, we have another suite of products that we put you through, as opposed to this one. This is for non-clients. So some people actually have contacted us to request assistance in drafting their application, and this is a competitive scheme, and we're not in a position to assist everybody who would be applying to it. So please be advised that while we'll clarify any queries you have, and we'll provide these kind of public briefings, and we have the website, etc., no company is actually being handheld in terms of the content of their applications. So the key area is that you'll be covering, and having said that we don't assist individual companies, but this is the best I can do to maybe give an overview to everybody. So we're looking for a well thought out plan. one that makes sense for your business. And the really important part is a step change for you. So it's important to remember that this will be company specific. So don't worry about what stage you are currently at versus another company. It's your step change that we're evaluating. So when you're writing your application, please assume we don't know you or your business. Tell us about your current online position, your web presence, who your target market is, internal skills you have or need, and if you're working with an agency at the moment. So we need to get as much detail in the narrative as possible, although I do that our application process has a restriction on the number of characters in each section that you can fill in. And again, that's to ensure that everybody has the same level of application coming into us and nobody's sending in an 8-page strategy document while somebody else only has an 8-page one. Everybody has the same restriction, okay? So, what else did I want to say here? What impact do you hope this will have on your business in terms of, for example, sales, skills, finances? What resources do you have? Do you have an online manager at present or an external resource? What difference will this assistance make to your business? You need to give us details of the service provider that's going to be providing the services, because that's an integral requirement of any proposal, as the focus of this scheme is to bring in capabilities and extra functionality that you don't have already in the business. And now is the time to engage with them. The earlier you contact them, the better developed plan you will produce in your application. And I think the retailers that are coming on to speak to us afterwards will probably give you that as a piece of advice as well. You really need to engage with your service provider at this point before the application. Make sure you're giving us a good breakdown of costs, tasks, activities, number of days, daily rate, and you're going to tell us your story as succinctly as you can, but the more we understand your business, the better the application will be and the higher the prospect of you securing funding. So just an overview of the main costs that are covered by the scheme. As I said, central to the grant are the costs of the external service provider. We'd encourage you to talk to more than one, at least 2 or 3, in order to get a good fit for your company. Each provider may have a different approach, and it's really important that you get a good match and are happy you can work with them over the 12-month period of the project. Over time in EI, we have compiled a list of interested external service providers, which you'll find on our website. However, it's not an approved suppliers list, and that's a really important point. You're not obligated to use anybody on this list. The choice of provider is ultimately yours. And it's just a signposting so that you have some level of a database of who is providing services on the marketplace. So the second main cost then is we cover 80% of the salary costs of an internal senior project champion. When I say senior, I don't mean aged. I just mean, somebody who's got some experience at management level really in the company, up to a maximum salary of €200 per day. Now, this person is generally somebody who will be working with the external provider to implement the project, and we allow costs for one only. In terms of the funding, this must be used to introduce what we call the additional functionality. I know I keep harping on about that. It can also be used for some in-house training on e-commerce or e-marketing type activities, but not external courses. It's really in-house training specific for your company. Now, it's important maybe to cover some of the ineligible costs as well. We don't cover upgrades to existing online channels that you needed to do anyway. We don't cover hardware or off-the-shelf software costs. The reason is that we want you to maximize the internal capability building. Otherwise, all the grants could just go on one-off purchases. And we don't cover online advertising campaigns, for example, Google ads, Facebook ads. Again, it's really to build your online capability within the company. And lastly, it's important to note, you can't include any costs that are incurred before the closing date of the call, which in this case is the 28th of September. Now, there's a fuller list on our website of ineligible costs. So again, please look into that. Now, so I'm just getting on to the evaluation process at this point, and this slide just outlines the weightings in this call, which are different to previous ones, so just make sure you take note of that. An evaluation panel comprising staff members from Enterprise Ireland will review all the applications and score all the proposals against these criteria. As before, as we did in the previous calls, a representative from the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation will also be included as an external evaluator in the process. Each project will be evaluated according to these weightings, and essentially, I suppose it's just to point out that the difference between this one and the last call is the ambition to internationalize. So the two pilot schemes we had in 2019 had a weighting of 25% on ambition to internationalize. This was reduced down to 10% in the scheme that was launched in April as the crisis hit, as we were in a bid to sustain viability at that point and generate sales. But for this second scheme now, this second COVID scheme, I'm going to call it, the department has asked that the export weighting be increased again, and we're living with it as being 20% at this time. So just to go into a little bit of the detail on the evaluation process. Firstly, quality of the proposal and potential impact on the business, weighting of 35%. So I'm just listing the few bullet points there, just saying we're looking at objectives and credibility of the proposed project. We'll be looking at costs and quality of the work plan and how it can be delivered in the 12-month time frame. And we'll also be trying to see how this plan supports the future growth in the company. Second criteria around the impact of proposed changes on the competitive position and viability of the company, also weighted at 35%. Here, we want to see how this project can improve the competitive position of the company and how it can support viability going forward from the impact of the COVID-19 crisis. The proposal should outline expected impact on the company's potential to remain viable and achieve future growth in terms of, for example, job retention and creation, sales opportunities. You should also probably at this point be demonstrating the need for state support and justify the need for funding. Like, why is this funding necessary? Are you losing customers to competitors online? Or are you trying to diversify into a niche area or a new market? You know, a bit of both maybe. The third one around the ambition to internationalize the business at 20%. As I said, this has increased, so there's more of a focus on this than there would have been in call 3. Here we are looking for the plan to internationalize and sell your products in export markets, to see, you know, what is your ambition around selling into the export market at present or in the future, and have you thought this through? The export plan really doesn't need to be a huge essay, and you'll see that you are restricted in the amount of characters you can use, but we need to know that you have thought it through. Finally, on the track record, this is a standard practice for any EI grant supports. We need to know the company's not insolvent and that the support will have a good impact. So we're looking for an assessment of the company's trading history to date and the financial viability of the company. One of the conditions of your application is that you provide statutory accounts, which are less than 2 years old. And they must be received by 3 p.m. on the closing date as well as your application. So when I may talk about that later if I have a bit of time, but I think maybe just to discuss a little bit around repeat applicants at this point, because I know we've obviously seen there that almost half of you are repeat applicants. What I'd say in general here is you may have used the first grant for something like research or building brand personas, maybe workshopping with consultants on research strategy, presence building or competitor analysis, something like that. So this application would need to clearly demonstrate this would need to be a step up from that. If you already have an e-commerce platform, what is the increase in capability you're striving for? Like, for example, you may already have a transactional website but are increasing functionality to integrate a real-time stock information system so the customers won't be able to place payment if an item isn't in stock. Or I suppose just thinking around, perhaps you plan to add a feature capable of visualizing products for customers in their own home. Advanced features or something like that you might expect to see in an application that has already had substantial online trading activity. Important to note for previous applicants that were unsuccessful are eligible to reapply, but it must be a modified proposal under this call, right? So, and for the people who were previously successful in their applications last time, you must have fully completed the project that was previously approved, as well as you must have made your final claim on all the eligible costs before this call close date. So I know there's some claims just currently coming into the system and they're being processed, and that's okay. If you haven't received payment for the grant, that's fine. It's just, we need to know that your final claim is in, and probably important to note there that if there is an unclaimed balance, we will be cancelling that at that point as you're making your final claim. So propose a clearly different project to that undertaken in previous calls, and this completion criteria actually also applies where related companies within a group structure wish to make an application. So if you've got a sister company who was successful before, the same applies. They need to have fully completed the project previously approved and made their final claim. Just thinking some other things as I sit on this slide. As I've said, the process is a really competitive one, so it's really important to provide as much detail as possible under the various headings, given I understand there's a restricted size in the number of characters, so, and I think maybe we'll hear some more about that later. A statement of intent regrowing the business and developing online sales is not enough. It really needs to be fully spelt out as to what you are going to do and how you're going to do it. You're not being asked to provide a full-blooded strategic plan for your whole business, but you do need to communicate to us for this online strategy what will be done, by whom, and what the impact will be. Each of these clearly articulated and coherent within the application. So that's got to be coherent with the costs as well. Okay, detail the consultant's tasks relative to the days and clarify what activities they will do relative to given costs and what the output will be of this. I suppose I'd say a simple heading is not enough. It needs to be stated in detail what will be done and what the impact will be. When talking about your international sales ambition, is based on, give us your detail other than as just a statement of a wish to grow international sales. This should reflect what's quantified in your export sales forecasts as well in years 1 and 2, which you'll see as part of the application form. How this forecast might be achieved, what is the strategy to get there. I'm sure you know, simply setting up a website alone will not automatically lead to export sales. Like there needs to be a thought out plan around this. Okay, so learnings from previous calls. Submitting your application is a 2-stage process. As I mentioned earlier, you submit the application itself, then you'll get a bounce back email from Enterprise Ireland asking you to submit your accounts separately, attaching them to a reply to that email as a PDF, and before the 3 p.m. deadline on the 28th of September. So we just ask you not to leave things till the last minute, because you may have to, you have to have time to do that. And some companies did get caught out with this deadline as they thought submitting the application was all that was required. And they missed the email asking for the accounts. So my advice is submit your application on time and read the email correspondence that you get from us at that point. Because if you don't receive the bounce back email, maybe check your junk folder, it may be in there, and it's asking you to now attach your accounts and send them to as a reply to that email. That's just the way the system was set up, and we're stuck with that, I'm afraid. So we'd strongly recommend, I'd say, that you don't leave it all until the closing date to start or submit an application, because we know technology can fail when we need it most. And, you know, the success rate in the last call was approximately 50%. So, you know, you can't allow for being outside of any of the parameters. If you're late or you don't satisfy the eligibility criteria, you will not be put through to the assessment and evaluation of your proposal stage. Just to remind you again, competing call means you're in a competition with each other for finite funds, but you are being scored, and your assessment is being based on your step up in your own capability. If you don't already have internal expertise, we recommend that you consider an internal champion as part of your costs. Because demonstrating that you're building the capability within the company and having continuity going forward will strengthen your proposal significantly. Now, if you don't meet the qualifying criteria, just please don't apply, because you're only wasting your own time. We do check, and your application will be rejected in light of fairness to those who are eligible. Many companies didn't complete all the sections. Now this is another one in the application form. So my advice would be, take the option to download a PDF copy of the application from the system before you submit it, and have a good read through there to check that you've included all the costs, that you're happy with your narrative. And something I suppose that came up recently was, you know, some people underestimate the costs that they're applying for. And I would say, just be conscious, increase your costs, don't underestimate the costs, as you can't increase the approval amount afterwards. So go for it in the first instance, okay? Take the time, again, choosing your service provider. Some companies maybe didn't give enough planning or thought in choosing their service provider, and then many had to change consultant either before the project started or during. Many companies did put in costs for Google, Facebook ads, etc., which were then discounted, and ultimately that will lead to you receiving a reduced grant. So I'm almost done. In summary, we need to know your company has looked at and has a good understanding of the impact that increased e-commerce activities will have on the business. Build it and they'll come is really not a viable strategy. You know, think before you start, is e-commerce right for you, or are you only going down this route because you've heard of other people who are? Websites do need to be constantly promoted. I don't have to tell you that. And, you know, have you an understanding of the cost of acquiring and retaining customers and the internal skills and resources required to make it happen? This isn't a hit and run type of scheme. This is funding for extra functionality, not just building a website and then letting it sit there. With regard to the external service provider selection, I would say make sure that they have both the skill set and the capacity, because especially at the moment where there's a lot of people looking for the skill sets out there in the marketplace. So just make sure that they're not biting off more than they can handle. And finally, I suppose I would say, once the call opens, which it did open on the 31st of August for applications, Enterprise Ireland staff are not in a position to discuss individual applications because it's a competitive call. So if you have specific queries, you should email them to the retail mailbox and we will answer them. And people generally, you know, are getting an answer that is available in the first place, most likely on our website, where there are maybe a few criteria that we need to specifically consider for someone, but we will answer them on an email. If you're trying to phone, it's impossible to get through to that team because they are very busy on the emails. So please do send the email into the retail mailbox, and it's retail@enterprise-ireland.com. As you can see there, we have streamlined and automated and tightened up the parameters of the application in this scheme to ensure we can process the high volumes in as quick a turnaround as possible. We appreciate the enormous difficulty and the enormous trading and the difficult trading environment that you're struggling in at the moment to survive in. What we do know is that there will be a permanent acceleration in online activity around the globe. So your drive to increase your online presence has never been more critical, and we want you to have a robust plan that makes this funding that's working to your best possible advantage. So a reminder again there, the key date is 3 p.m. 28th of September. Actively prepare so you're not rushing. Thanks for listening, and I'll hand over now to Jessica and Sinead, maybe to introduce themselves and give their experiences. They were successful in our July approvals.
Okay, Tracy, I'll jump in and thank you first off for that presentation. And of course, you don't get off scot-free because there's a few questions coming through which we'll pick up after we've heard from Jessica and Sinead. So thanks a million for that. Jessica, can we turn to you first and give us your experience of applying for this through the Kilkenny group, please?
Yeah, no problem. I suppose, first of all, it was obviously great to be approved for the grant. We're putting it to good use currently and the project is underway. So I suppose that's the first thing I'd like to say. I suppose from the experience of doing it, I think you need to, I suppose, take your time doing it. I did it on a Word document first. And then when I went into the application, just take note of the amount of characters or amount of words you're allowed to have in each section. So go through the form, see how many characters it. do it on Word and then obviously copy it across. I think that was kind of a tip for doing it. It's very hard to edit inside in the actual application form afterwards. And the other one, I think Tracy mentioned it earlier as well, but make sure you sync with your provider in terms of what they can do for you, the costings on it, because you just want to make sure that you're able to apply for what you need to actually get completed as part of your project. So they'd be kind of the two main tips that I'd have.
Great stuff. And Sinead, just turning to you from Thunder's Bakery. So we've obviously heard from Kilkenny. I get the whole gifting bit with Kilkenny, the need to get online. What was your motivation for Thunder's Bakery to get online, and how have you found it?
Hi, Duncan. We already had a small website. We had our own distribution channels with our own vans, but we weren't nationwide. So, and we had more and more people wanting to buy online and moving through their phones to buy. And with COVID, we only have 1 or 2 per store. We've a click and collect. So it was easier for someone to buy, come in and leave really quickly. There's only 3 of us in our office. So it took us about 3 days to decide what were the pitfalls from our point of view and the customer's point of view. And then it took about a half a day to talk to the developer and for them to put together what their proposal would be, because the expert in the room was them. And then for our champion, we decided it would be me. So it's kind of 2 days a week for me now for the time that we put in, which happened to coincide with I work from home 2 days a week. So that's deliberately online now. It took a long time to get us to the point where the developer knew what we needed. And then it took about 3 days at home. Like Jessica said, I copied and pasted all the questions into Word, had each document typed out, and then I copied and pasted it into the form. It wasn't compatible with a spreadsheet. I like a spreadsheet. So it's very it's a text document. And when you're an accountant running a business, a spreadsheet makes loads of sense for growth and projections. So I found that difficult, but that was just because I'd rather numbers than words. And just on the international bit, it was 10% at the time. It's 25% now, and we decided that we could go international, but Northern Ireland is considered international with. So we had to develop a product that could ship with a different provider, which was on post DPD, whatever it was. And that was something that we had no idea, so the developer came up with how we would be able to upgrade our website to be able to facilitate 2 shipping methods. And we've developed a product now that I think we're 8 weeks away from going live. But I took the next day off after I finished that form. I just took the day off. I said, okay, but it's competitive. We figured if we did the equivalent of a 1-page CV to get someone's attention that understood we were going to get growth, that's what we went. We were going for a job, and thankfully we got our funding and we're spending away, and it is time consuming. And yes, your internal champion is going to have to work really hard to just even get it live.
Brilliant. And Sinead, can I just ask you, so you said you're going live there, did you say in the next week or so?
In about 6 to 8 weeks. It was a 15-week project just to get us to this point. We had a photographer in. That took 3 full days of just photography, but another 3 full days to prep the list, the products and everything else. So there's a lot of work goes into the the prep of it all. So it's well, hopefully, where are we at now? Hopefully the end of October we'll be looking at getting ourselves live.
So just in time for Christmas then.
Well, yeah, it's the Christmas photo shoot. That's happening next.
And in terms of your thoughts about what it's going to mean to your business, in terms of what percentage of your business do you see? Is it something you see as relatively small to then grow, or have you already sort of got a view that it's going to be a significant percentage of your business going forward?
I think it's going to be huge. Our online business relative to over the counter is pretty small, but since COVID, we're up about 285% every week online. But it's so tiny in comparison to the overall that it's just incredible, the amount. Even I listened to Caroline in the office, and she's trying to talk our 70-year-old generation who want to buy online, but they don't want us to do it for them. So when we have a one-page checkout or one-click to check out is to capture them, make it so simple that they have their phone in their hand or they're on their iPad. They add a cake or they add whatever else to their cart, and it automatically sends them to checkout instead of having to take 2 more steps to do that. So and that generation, when we see them in the shop, they're cautious coming in the door. They want to be gone so quickly. And I think for them, for peace of mind, the quicker they can come in and out. They don't necessarily want delivery because they want to be outside, but spend as little time in a small space as possible.
Yeah. It's all about customer care, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, Jessica, can I just return to you for a moment? In terms of where you are on the journey of implementing your e-commerce site and everything, where are you on that journey at the minute?
So we're still kind of in probably the first phase of it. So we're building out a online marketplace for international and more domestic growth. So we're still working on the back end and wireframing what that looks like for all the different users that would be on the platform. So you're talking about an administrator on, I suppose, on our team. You're talking from a B2B perspective, what they need to do on the back end of that platform and what that functionality looks like, and making the UX of it. And it as easy as Sinead describes for the customer who wants a one-click checkout. It's the same when you want businesses to be on your market. They want to make the functionality easy for them, and they are able to upload products easily and add delivery options if they're fulfilling themselves. If we're fulfilling, all that, their commercials, they can see how much product they're selling. We're able to send them reporting. So we're still at, I suppose, the early phase of that, and we're building that out because I suppose as when you build out these sort of products, the cost gets very expensive if you don't do it right the first time. So you just need to go through all that kind of testing and builds. And we're looking at it early 2021 on this. We're going to be taking the full 12 months. And to Sinead's point, yeah, it's a full-time job for the champion internally to do this. Or squeezing extra hours into your week. If you want to make it a 60-hour week, you just pile some more on inside there. But it's well worthwhile. It's going to make a huge change for our business, for Kilkenny, by having this. It's going to provide more jobs for people, more interesting work for people to go through, and it's going to provide more for, I suppose, the local economy and local businesses as well too. So I suppose it's all encompassing is kind of the project that we're working for and we got the grant for.
Great stuff. Listen, thanks a million, ladies. Look, I'm going to go back to Tracy for a moment. Tracy, we've got a few questions that have come through. We may not get through all of these, but let's have about sort of 10 minutes. If you could do your best to answer some of these that have come up. I know some of them come up before this call and some of them have come up as we've been talking. But
Shoot.
Right. Does there have to be an internal champion to qualify for funding?
No, there doesn't. You can use all of the funding proposition on your external service provider, but what I would say is it does strengthen your proposal if you have a staff member that's being skilled up and is going to manage the online side of the business moving forward. The internal champion should be a senior project champion, like a manager level of above. But it's important to note, if you have existing staff already allocated to this function and you're already in the online space and you want to spend the full grant on a service provider, we would recognize that, well, that's fine too, because your service provider is providing those capabilities to somebody that's already focused on the job. So not necessarily, but you need to have someone internal who's bringing that capability forward into the future.
Okay, and on a similar line then, do do we have to either employ a new staff member or promote an existing staff member, and can we include a proportion of an existing salary?
Okay, so I'm not sure I understand the question fully. It may be a new hire, but it doesn't have to be a new hire, and salary costs are the costs that would be included. So yes, probably I should just give a brief detail of maximum funding that you can get support towards 25,000 of the salary costs of your internal champion, and towards that we can give up to 20,000 in grant, being the 80%. How I'm getting that is your internal project champion costs must not exceed the external service provider costs. So if you're maximizing the support, let's say, you might get 20,000 towards 25 grand of an external service provider and 20,000 towards 25 grand of your internal champion, but you couldn't ask for 25 grand against your internal champion and being more than half of the whole thing, right? So they can only be up to a limit of 50%. The other thing to say on that is maximum salary cost is 25k for your internal champion. Then there would be a maximum of 125 days at a maximum daily salary rate of €200. You'll see that detail in listed on our webpage. That equates to a salary of about 46,500 euro gross annually. And if the salary level is less than 200 euros a day, you can only claim the max of the actual salary you pay. Like, you can't claim up to 100 euros per day if you only pay 170 euros per day.
Okay, so that sounds quite complex, what you've just gone through. So is that all available on the website?
It is, and it's well worth going in and just perusing that.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to ask you a slightly easier question then. So let's go back to our leaving cert days. What percentage do you need to achieve to be successful? Give us a one-line answer.
Yeah, that's a good question. So typically it's a 60% minimum score out of the 100 that you're going for is where we have a cutoff point.
Okay, so anything less than 60?
Anything less than 60 is probably not going to get approval, but remember, it is a competitive call, so the highest scoring applications will be approved until the fund is utilised. So we may end up at a level higher than 60, maybe 64 or 5, depending on the application and the standard.
Okay, and here's another one which I know has come up quite a bit. So here's a business that's primarily a retail business, but they have a restaurant and a cafe, which is
okay.
The retail. Are they still eligible to apply?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it does come up a bit. If you have a retail store on or before 29th of February 2020 and derive the majority of revenue from retailing products directly to individual consumers, you're eligible. So where you're providing both products and services, in this case, you must give us a breakdown of your sales revenue for a recent trading period that shows that you have greater than 50% product sales. So the majority has to be product sales. Now, that is for a recent trading period, and we will consider a recent trading period to be up to the 31st of August when this call opened.
Okay, so I'm just going to go to a couple that have just come through recently. So this one from Karen Murphy. So it's saying, hi, we applied last round, but were unsuccessful. So this time we'll obviously have a modified proposal, but the purpose of the funding will be for the same application. Is this okay?
Yes.
Sorry, I'll just finish up. So after we make this online trading application, can we apply for any Enterprise Ireland funding?
Okay, good question.
Two questions there. Yeah.
So yes, for the first part, we definitely would like to see an application from someone who was unsuccessful in the first round. You may have gotten some feedback from us on that in relation to why it was unsuccessful, but so you'll need to strengthen the proposal this time. I suppose I would consider that we will have a similar standard in the applications that come through. So if your proposal wasn't successful the last time, you would need to strengthen it this time. But it can be on the same project, that's fine.
Okay.
Be eligible for Enterprise Ireland funding moving forward? No. We need to be very clear here that you're not a client of Enterprise Ireland just because you're receiving this funding under this scheme. We're just managing this scheme for the department, but you are not a services or a manufacturing client, which is our existing client base. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen into the future and if we will run more calls like this. I would hope we would, but right now you wouldn't become a client of Enterprise Ireland for further funding under, say, recruitment of key person or other grants that maybe you've been looking at on our website.
Okay, so there's a couple more, and then I might ask you a third and we'll finish. But so this one, the ambition to internationalize the business, yeah? So if the weighting on this has now been increased, is it applying if this is not part of your business plan?
Did you say, is it worth applying?
Is it still worth applying if it's not part of your business plan, that ambition to internationalize your business?
So this is like, I guess, studying for your leaving cert and knowing that you're going to go in and only answer 4 out of 5 questions. You know, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage in the first place. But if you have a really strong proposition, you could apply and see. But I would say process into how you could internationalize, you know, would be required if you're going to get above that 60 and be competitive with other applications that come in.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. And then there's a final one here that I'm going to read out to you. So this is from Robert Pickett. So the internal champion, are the costs to be applied for? Are they limited to just 12 months worth of salary?
The proposal that you're putting in is for costs for a 12-month period. So yes.
They are. Okay. All right. And one final question that's just come through to my phone here. So can wholesalers with trade retail outlets also qualify?
So what I'm going to say here is, and you'll see this on our website, you must be operating a predominantly B2C, so business to consumer business, to be eligible here. So that's greater than 50% business to consumer. So where you have a mixture maybe of B2C and B2B, in that case, the application needs to again show us that the breakdown is greater than 50% for a recent trading period.
Great stuff. Okay. All right. Look, I think that's gone through all the questions, guys. So we'll call it We'll call it a day at this point. We've gone through 50 minutes, and I think there's some really useful information that's come up on. So first off, Tracy, thank you so much for your advice and for moving through this presentation this afternoon. And additionally, thank you very much to Jessica from the Kilkenny Group and Sinead from Thunder's Bakery for your input today. And perhaps more importantly, thank you for the 50 or so people that have attended this this afternoon. I hope you got what you're looking for from it. And if you haven't, or if you've got any further questions, please feel free to give us a call or drop us a line and we'll move from there.